So here we are with part two of Short Story to Script. We hope to be joined later by John Shustek. We have, Barbara Dubos. I'm sorry about the extra comma. I will get rid of that, Barb. And Gloria McMillan are here to discuss, now that we have actual examples to work from, part two about turning your short story into a play. And this should be interesting to anyone who has been writing short flash fiction or even long novellas. A novel you might have to make into a couple plays, but here we go. And first I should go back and introduce Barb. Oh, and here comes somebody. This is probably John. So we'll wait till John gets logged in. I'm assuming that's who it is. And I will introduce Barbara Dubos. Barbara, can you tell people where you're located and what story you're thinking about changing into a play?
Well, hello everyone. I'm located in Youngstown, Ohio. I grew up in a small area of Youngstown, used to be East Youngstown, then turned into Campbell, Ohio. And I'm thinking of turning Consumed, my contributing story, into a play or a possible screenwriting adventure.
Okay, that is great. And we really value your story. It's one of the only ones that's historical. It's not set in the current time or in our own lifetime. Yeah, this is historical, but more dealing with the past of these people, even beyond the actual time that it was set. There's a lot of flashing back to the youth of the woman in her home country. John, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you just fine. We can hear you. Could you check
Yeah,
in with us? Tell people who you are and your background in theater and where you're physically located.
So I live in Fair Oaks, California, which is just outside of Sacramento. But right now I'm in the foothills of the Sierra in Amador County, which is beautiful. And so my story is Time Hangs a Louie. And so I'm really looking forward and have been enjoying turning it into a play. I have 50 years of life in the theater as an actor, dancer, director, producer, so on. And so I'm really happy to be here. And if there's anything that I know about playwriting and production, staging for your stories, I'm happy to talk about that.
Oh, I think both of you are going to be excellent co-hosts. And I really appreciate, John, this is a little, hopefully not too big a digression, but I'm very into the Czech animation field. I don't know if you know anything about them. And they're huge into puppetry and stop puppets in the Czech Republic. And I thought of you just recently. I made that connection that you're involved in that. I wonder if you know that the Czech animators are very much into that.
Yeah, they are fabulous, and they're a great inspiration for storytelling and strange stories. And yeah, I really admire that.
We may have to do a whole. We could do a whole separate thing about bringing in puppets. We could talk. Any of our steel mill stories could be recast into a animated or a puppetry, but that's another whole level. Another whole level. Yeah. So we won't go there yet. But okay, I'm Gloria McMillan, kind of the facilitator of this and co-facilitator. I'm physically in Tucson, Arizona, but I grew up in East Chicago, Indiana. My father spent 40 plus years working in the field forces of Inland Steel, which is at present called Cleveland Cliffs. And my whole life growing up was in the, I don't want to say shadow of, but in the zone of the zone of influence of steel and steel industry. So it's very difficult for us to write about a life that doesn't include that. And I think we hope that our our listeners will be aware that anybody who writes about his, her, their own life has to bring in such things as the setting, and that's our setting, our milieu. Okay, well, as it says on the screen, here we go. If I can find my control buttons here. So these are from the last time. We have a little bit of surrealism because I love surrealism. It's much more interesting than the bland graphics that they had. And you can see the Art Institute here with the it's raining teddy bears. And I just thought, well, that's kind of a nice thing to open from last time. Okay, so the introduction is that this time we're going to be doing some of the same things, but with specific examples. And this is from our first part 1, where we look for scenes in our existing story. Then we can mark them, we can highlight them, we can invent new dialogue where it just summarizes. And then we'll go into how you might have to stage it from a story, and then a few final tips. And some of that I brought in from the first, our first part. I didn't know who was going to show up, so apologies. I'm just going to start using my example. And in this example, we have Aphrodite Megaris, who here is an AI creation. And Aphrodite goes as Affy. And in my story, she gets to be a regular commuter on the bus. And a bus is an excellent vehicle, haha, pun intended, for a play because it's an omnibus. It comes from the word omnibus, which means everything and everybody. It's not like a car. Think about the difference. The car is very selective and it's personal, it's subjective, one person. But the bus, you're being impinged on by all kinds of other consciousnesses, other people around you, and whatever their island universe is. Everybody's an island universe. You have yours and they have theirs, but they're all in contact on a bus. So that's the ground, and she is what they used to call protagonist. I don't know if that's the current favored term, but Affy is the one that we get into the story through her mind. And she starts wondering, what do these other people think? And there's a number of them, and I'll go into that if I can find the button. Well, here, before we do that, from last time, I'm bringing up the same slide about things you can do. And these are just visual tricks to get yourself excited because you have all this black script, all this black font text looking at you. You can sort of map your script. You can make it into mental mapping. Say Affy's in red, everything she says, you can put someone else in green. And not only does it help you to pull up these dialogues and see them faster, but it adds color, literally, to what you're working on. Or you could pop that picture of Affy here and there if you wanted to. So those are little tricks. You don't have to use any of that. And that's not a standard thing, but it's just something to make. Artists often have a fear of the blank canvas. So here we have a story that seems to be perpetually, eternally a story. When you start putting these things into color, you're messing with it. It's no longer just a story. You've messed with the color of the font. So now it's on its way to becoming something else. Okay, so in Affy's world on the bus here, we have people speaking, but they're not speaking out loud. Melba gets on, and she's someone who works as a domestic help for a lady in Northwest Indiana. And Affy isn't actually reading her mind, but the narrator switches, like puts a spotlight on Affy's thoughts. Then the narrator opens up and puts a spotlight on Melba's thoughts, then on Ivanka's thoughts, then on Jim's thoughts. And this is opening up conversation. You can also add some dialogue at this point if you need bridges between them. And this is turning a monologue, which is that narrator voice, which is about 90% or 80% of most of the stories in the book. Our book is Children of Steel, and we're dealing with the stories that were contributed to that book. These are all stories of people who grew up in steel mill towns that historically made steel for this country. But some of this is universal, and this problem is universal from anybody's short story. The narrative voice overweighs all the other voices. And the thing that you have to do is bring up the dialogue voices, make them much more important than the narration, because that shrinks to your stage instructions. The narration, you can have it, by the way, you can have a narrator. If you need some of that, make it a narrator. Think of Our Town. It can be an omniscient narrator, most of them are, or it can be a narrator who has only a certain limited amount of dialogue that the monologue that the narrator wants to say. And maybe the other people can give some examples of that, but that's just to start you thinking you can have a narrator, but shrink it down. Don't make it the main part. Okay, so here is, I'm bringing in John because I knew he was going to be here. So how will you do some of these tricks to your not script, your story that is now not a script? I know John is here. Hello, John.
Yes, yes. So, it's my story, Time Angel Louis, is a more science fiction-y, fantasy thing that as a story, as a narrative story, as a realistic play wouldn't work. So first thing I did was I wrote a treatment, in which I kind of sussed out how could I tell this story in a way that would be effective and entertaining. And so it occurred to me that if I staged it, put it on stage as if it were a old-time radio broadcast, a radio drama from the 30s, 40s, and 50s. And some of those, they had a live studio audience during a live broadcast of the play. And well, that's perfect. So we have a live audience here. They will become the live audience in the radio drama, and there'll be an announcer, which was typical, versus lead into the commercial sponsors, and then a narrator. Sometimes, as Gloria talked about, the narrator can take different forms, and so in some of those old time radio programs, it was a host. It was a host that was there every week, who introduced the story and would interject, connecting, the connections at times during the telling. And then I would put all the actors on stage as if they were in the recording studio, a radio recording studio, with a sound effects table with old-time sound effects, hand operated rather than electronic, and and on-air red light, and all of the accoutrements of a radio production done as a on stage, as if it were really happening, with the old RCA style capsule microphones hanging, and so on, and the actors at their reading stands. And it gave me a chance to actually put was playing the main characters, Postal Boy and Bucky Stozak, speak for themselves, and so that was a big change, because in the story it's all a trusted narrative style, and there's a single narrator who told the story. But here, I could have each person tell their story, the Little League manager, and so on, and that was fun to work that out, and then have it be a cliffhanger at the end, which was not really in the short story. But as a radio drama, it's certainly something that happened with a serial kind of production. So that's how I approached it. The elements, because it was kind of realistic. Some of these things in the story actually happened. I experienced them, but it had this science fiction twist of being in the past and in the future. And so I could play with elements, the staging, and have the elements be fantastic instead of realistic. And so, and all of that came out when I did the treatment. How I was going to deal with the set, the staging, time, the place, and so yeah, that's where I'm at in the process. So I have a first draft.
If you can keep talking a couple minutes, I will bring it up with your new slide added. So that will be part of our recording. I'm going to tell the key points and just elaborate any anecdotes, ramble. Yeah. Feel free.
I can do that. So in terms of the other stories in Children of Steel, mainly they are real stories. They're realistic, and so the elements for staging could be, as Peter Brook would say, an empty space that is nothing except actors and the text. It could be from that level to an abstraction of realistic elements, like, instead of things that are suggestive of interior scenes or exterior scenes, but not full sets, or full sets, full interior scenes. And so when you think about, dramatizing your story, that's consideration, is how is it going to appear on stage? Full realistic sets, partial suggestive scenery, props, or nothing at all, just the story and storytellers, the actors. And so all of those things work with the kind of narrative stories that are in Children of Steel. The other component that is helpful is that there actually is a standard format for play scripts, so that it is kind of standardized, so that a director, a producer, actors are very familiar with the text. As soon as they open it, they know exactly how to orient themselves and to get the information that they need. And that's something that I can share with you. It's a pretty simple formatting process, but it really does help a reader, an actor, a director get their orientation, and for the actors to know their lines and whatever stage directions the author might want to include. In my story, there were certain elements, sound effects, and visuals, because I did include a rear projection screen, that I thought were essential to the story. But I also left it open to the director, producer to add sound effects and add visuals if they felt, they wanted to, or it would add to the storytelling. All of those things you can indicate in this play script format.
Okay, well, I'm just finishing, and if you can put your link to that format in the chat, I'll try to add it before we end. I'll add it to.
Unfortunately, I'm on a phone, and
oh, that's right. Well, I have it over in my email. I may not be able to do that one, but I'll add it. I'll try it.
Okay.
I'll add it later. It will
if not, let me know.
This is on the fly, but maybe I'll just delete that slide because it may not be possible. So we'll go without that. All right, but here we are with our new configuration with John's. This is great. And then I can do Barbara's. Let me see if I can call this up with the new slide added. And then you can say, that's all right. Okay, and then the next one is that, and we will try to make it from current slide here. Can you see that, John? Hello?
Well, Gloria, all I have is voice. I'm on a phone, and I don't see anything. Hello?
Hmm.
Oh, I'm sorry, John. I was muted. All right.
Oh,
Yeah, I thought, why isn't he answering? It's because he couldn't hear me. Okay, so on your slide, John, here's what I have. John's radio play, live audience, next point, sound effects, general series host, all actors and sound table on stage, old style microphones, and a choice, how many or few props. So I've added the slide and it says, how could John's story be staged?
okay.
And that's just boiling it down, leaving a lot out, but people heard the other parts. And Barb, what do you think? Does it look all right?
Oh, yes. I mean, each story is going to be unique as far
Mhm.
as, how to stage them. So you have to kind of read into this, the story and what you want the audience to visualize and how you're going to put that across to them.
Right. So while you talk about what you need to learn or what you want to say, I will create a similar slide for you, but I will have to stop the share. Is that agreeable?
Do you want to know what I visualize at this point?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
but I need
Um,
to stop the share to give you a slide where you could talk. It's just where you're talking as one of the people participating.
oh, okay.
I'll just boil it into a few points like I did with John.
Well, each story, my story,
Let me stop the share. Wait. Okay.
okay.
Are you okay with me stopping the share and creating the slide?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. So now I'll go do that. Go ahead and talk. But
Oh,
wait,
okay. I was
wait,
wondering.
hold on. I'll tell you when to start because then I have my slide that I can work from at that point. And before that, I don't have a slide to work on, so I do need a slide to work on. Um, so this is your slide. How can Barbara's story be staged? This is sort of creating in two dimensions while you are speaking, and it's a good idea. It means now that you've each had your say, and
Well, at this point in the creative process, the first thing that comes to my mind when I think of consumed, and I think of how would I effectively want this story to be portrayed to the audience, which set wise, it takes place mostly in a company house. The set itself would give the feeling of the living conditions historically, um, authentic type clothing, appliances, things like that. Possibly a two-story effect where you have a winding staircase going up and an open set with the actors in it. And the dialogue would be the day by day life as far as how much time the story's going to be told in. Like there are months that pass in the story, so it would have to maybe be a change of, you know, clothing or time, and as time goes on, things like that. But more or less an empty stage with a type of apartment feeling in it. What comes to mind to me would be A Streetcar Named Desire, that type of setting. Where the actors, you know, most of the content is so intense and so meaningful that the audience really doesn't need to go out of that place. Does that help?
Yes, yes. I was trying to get back to the meeting so I could, you know, I guess I can talk while I'm looking at this. Sorry, I thought I had to move, but I really don't. So I'm creating some points for our future audiences here, which is wonderful. This is very interactive. You see how interactive it is? This is not a done thing. Okay, you haven't seen it yet. I have Barbara's vision for her play set, a company house, possibly two-story house. That will be the open front rooms. Costumes, 1950s and flashback period, maybe the
Well, yeah, it would have to go back to 1916. So we're
19.
talking pretty vintage. Yeah.
Okay, so the whole thing is 1916.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. I thought you said 1950s, and that's
No,
right.
19. No, well, you know, the set wise, I think A Streetcar Named Desire was in the 50s.
Right.
But I think that set was more, if I remember the movie correctly, it was just really set in that apartment building where they live, Blanche and all that. And
Mhm.
so I visualize on stage a 1916 company house setting, which I've researched. And so that would be easy to recreate. I mean, that's not a
Sure.
problem.
Sure. That's not a problem. You'll just have to stylize and simplify it. That's all.
Yeah, we actually have one set up here in a museum. That's where I went
Ah,
constantly to get a
mhm.
feel for it. They recreated one. And so
And
you can
sometimes
actually
you have to bend the rooms if they go backwards in space from the front door. You'll have to bend them sideways so they're side by side, right?
Mhm.
Instead of you can't have one room going back into the other ones because an audience
No,
they
it would be a winding, it would be a spiral staircase up to the second floor.
oh, okay, we'll put that in as part of the notes using
Yeah,
the
you
staircase.
have the first floor and then you have like a very narrow. They were very narrow and spiraling up to a second floor with you could probably do probably two bedrooms and a very small set. But that's what I envisioned because that's where most of the story would take place.
Wouldn't a lot of
And
the story take place in the kitchen?
yeah, the kitchen, but usually with all the commotion within the story and the life, there was a lot of running up and down the stairs.
Okay. Your story. And I have to put the title of your story here. I forgot. Consume. Well, some of the students watching this may have read your story, so they'll be familiar with it. Okay. Any other aspects of the change? Okay, this is mostly about staging. What about all of that interior monologue? What are you going to do?
Well, pretty much well, that would be up to adapting it for stage. I mean, it's a short story, so you could add more dialogue in there. That would all depend on once it get you know, once you get to that stage where you're putting it in a script, you know, you're going to alter it and add certain things, but most of the dialogue would probably be in that story with some expansion maybe for the children. Yeah, I didn't go too much with the children. You could add that in, more of them, uh, you know, their reactions and things. So it would need a little bit of adaptation to keep the audience and get more of a
Could
feel
I
there.
make a suggestion? Because some of these are comments that she would not want people to know. You might set up a specific color spotlet.
Oh yeah,
You
I
know,
mean
when she's making, could I? when she's making a comment about her husband, she made some very caustic comments that were to herself alone. And when it's these private moments, you could have her lit in a red spotlight or something. She moves up to the stage front, upstage, I guess they call that. And then the red light comes on, and people will get used to that after once or twice, that her other thoughts are just neutral. But when she gets into these really, you could almost say, it isn't bitchy because she's being treated so badly, but very caustic, then the red light will spotlight her. She moves closer up and is almost addressing the audience, even though those were her most private thoughts. And that will make it clear two types of speech are coming from her thoughts, and it can be handled with light. So I just put that in as interior monologue, move to speech.
Okay, yeah, as far as that,
important.
yeah, I'm not familiar with, putting this is putting a play together, but as far as, yeah, the feeling and the mood, that's absolutely, now I even feel the character with you just talking.
And so I put more words here where she's caustic about husband Roman, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there might be another time when she is caustic, and these are her very innermost, it's her more meta comments about her life. The rest might be more run-of-the-mill, day by day, but this is her overall very caustic summing up of the waste of her life that she feels is going on. And then that red light could come on. What do you think of that, John?
I think that those kinds of staging techniques for transitions from internal monologue to regular dialogue, that's a perfect way to handle a situation like that. Then similarly with sound effects, they make like transitions of time or transitions in place. But lighting is definitely, an aspect of, it's almost like sculpture. You're sculpting light. And so usually you don't see a lot of directions for lighting because in a play script, unless it's like very essential. But like what you're talking about, Gloria, that would be something that would be, a recommended technique for handling that kind of transition. Otherwise, lighting designers, they know what instruments they have, they know what capacity they have, and they and the directors decide upon the lighting. But it's in this kind of story, especially as growing up in a mill town, the sky was always an important factor because it was not just blue sky and clouds. It was the sky would change colors. Where I lived, often the sun was white because of the mill, and so that's a consideration. You can really set a space using light, and you can get very creative and very inventive with light. Then it plays into so one of the things in doing a treatment is what is the overall mood that I want this story to be in, and if melancholy, that changes the orientation of lighting and set colors, costuming. Is it light? Is it witty? That changes lighting, costume, and set colors. And so those are all considerations, and it's very enjoyable to enter into this kind of plastic, moldable space of play creation. And because in your mind, you can play and say, oh, no, I don't like it, and it's gone. It's not until you finally get to it being ready to mount that things need to be set. Up until then, you can play.
Yeah, I like that because I never thought of it, but you are right, John and Gloria. There's so much intensity that for the audience, it would be very effective to have the different lighting for the mood. That would really bring the audience into the intimacy of the character, which she's meant to be.
Well, I'm going to bring back the new slides. I accidentally deleted John's, and I'm so brilliant. I overwrote his slides, so I did recreate. I was like, oh no, I replaced him with you. So hopefully we can get back to the beginning of these now. Okay, I hope you can see this one. It's about how can he be staged. Be sure I got them in right. And here's John's points. Are you all seeing this?
Yes.
Not John. I mean, are you seeing this, Barbara? You're the checker,
Yeah.
the fact checker on this one since John cannot do it. Okay, so then I moved down one. And then he recently brought in the uses of light, so I created a new slide on that for our audience. Then we moved to Barbara, you, and your vision. And this is the points I got. And if you want me to, I can add a whole second slide. But see what you think. We have at present about the set, company house, possibly two-story with spiral staircase, costumes, 1916 era, and your influence that you felt was Streetcar Named Desire in the feel of the setting and the dialogue. And
Yeah.
we talked about interior monologue being moved to speech and color spotlight. I put spotlit, but I can change that. When
Yeah.
Olga, I can put her name, Olga, when Olga. Let's see. I don't know if I can make changes while I'm in the meeting. Well, maybe I can. It's giving me a cursor now. Let's see if I can do that. Oh, yes. Instead of she, Olga. So this is what I love. This is a meeting where we're creating as we're talking. And I haven't ever done a meeting like this before, but this is kind of fun. Okay, John, do you have any other ideas that we could incorporate into a final slide that you hadn't thought of before, or shall I move on to the next stuff?
Yes, music.
Music, oh, okay. Okay, so we'll just put, let's see, I'm going to duplicate slide. How do I do that here? Duplicate slide, but I will put John on music instead of what we have. Okay, and I'll whip out this text here. Okay, John, go for it.
So it could be live music, it could be recorded music, it could be music the audience hears prior to play starting, or and or the walkout music, what comes at the end of the piece, to kind of like sandwich it. Or it could be specially designed music. I recall I directed a series of one-act plays written by steelworkers. And one of the pieces written by steelworkers was his impressions of the sounds of the steel mill. In particular, this was Gary Works, and he wrote it as a piece of poetry, and so he used language to have the kind of indication of the sounds, the trucks, the rail yards, the cranes, the clanging, the steam, all of those things, in his narrative, he spoke these as if it was a poem. But when we produced it, we actually backtracked what he was saying with actual sounds from the mill. And so it made it, amplified his work and made it quite an acoustic environment for the audience.
I do remember that. I have seen your production and I do remember that. Okay, so it embodied the steel mill and sound effects and musical passages or just sound effects?
Well, yeah, it could be musical passages for sure. You know, many immigrants.
Oh, sure, maybe
music.
snatches of songs that they might be humming and things.
That's
Okay,
right.
so play and music. We have live music, recorded music, entrance and exit music, music of the steel mill. And there's a lot of description after that. Anything else?
No.
Okay, so Barbara, can you think of anything? Maybe snatches of popular music from 1916?
Yeah, something like that. I never really thought about music, but I'm sure for entertainment, once she was here, there had to be some, or maybe some background music of the saloons. There were a lot of saloons in the background. Piano playing, things like that. What
Like
would you find?
ragtime piano, sure. I also added folk music because she might hum lullabies to her children from the old country or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
So
So these
those
are things I would never have thought of before we all got together. We created this together. I'm so pleased with you all. Okay.
well,
So,
yeah, because she did have to comfort her children, so that
mhm.
can be definitely added in there. I like that. Absolutely.
Okay, so now we have that. And these are things you can highlight in colors. You know, say you're using the
Sure.
dialogue is all in red, you can put blue in for sound effects or
Mhm.
music when you're adding them. And these things, you can delete all the color by just putting everything back to black at the end, but as you're working on it.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah.
so should I move on to our last lap here? And in this last lap, we're deciding on cast and how many can we have. So this is from our last, I guess you're all seeing this. Are you all seeing the slide about cast?
Yes. Mhm.
Um, I don't know if we need to get into a lot of individual notes on this, but we can just verbally talk about it. John, what are your thoughts about casting and writing your
Oh,
cast?
in Time Hangs the Louie, because it's a radio production, an actor can play multiple roles. So it has a kind of built-in flexibility. You do need separate voices for the announcer and a separate voice, a very distinct voice for the narrator host character. But other characters like a manager or umpire, those can be done by the same actor. And so there's some flexibility. So in mine, probably it could be done easily with four actors.
And I also have a very small cast. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. The bus driver has only a couple words he says. He could be doubled with one of the male character, well, the only male character other than him. Um, and so I have basically three speaking parts. I have, no, wait, no, there are more. I'm sorry, I take that back. I have Ivanka, and now I've added some thoughts of her daughter and her son talks. So that's three right there. So it's total six, basically. But two of those can be doubled. So that could bring it down to four. Maybe even the child could be doubled. It could be one of the women could play the child in a higher voice. So it could be three or four people, but four would be more comfortable to pull mine off. And That's something that you can decide later on when you're starting to think about how you'll be staging and who will be playing what roles. That comes in a little later sometimes. First, I just write the play script, talking to Barbara, and then I'd worry about who can double for what.
Mhm.
So our next, these are kind of the wrap-ups here. From the last time, this is still good advice to be sure to get your script read. First of all, get anyone who lives around you and you really see before you start sending it out. And then you can record a Zoom of it and you can study that. That's one way to have a reading, even if it's only you and one family member. And that's very useful. We didn't used to have that tool. So then you can send your script out. You can do some work like we are doing with this group we have called Planet Zoom Players by making readings that are essentially animated or partly animated on YouTube. And you can set up a group that would meet every month and they can just share with you how things are going. And that could be done on Zoom as well. So we want to thank you for being with us. This is again another very strange AI figure, and AI isn't good on crayon. It's not good on hands. So this looks very much like a Vulcan salute. So, oh, and I have to change the Mary Lou Cowley on part 2 here. Barbara Dubose. And we wish to thank you. And I think that's our last slide. So then I will stop share. Back to us. Thank you all for coming and viewing. And we hope that in the future we'll hear from some of you, whether this is helpful or if you start to do that project at Indiana University Northwest, if this can be used as a part of that process, we would just love it. So I guess for now I'll say goodbye. And those of us that are physically here can keep talking, but I'm going to stop the recording at this point. So see y'all later.
Thank you, Gloria.